Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Talk Conversation Series, a peer knowledge resource by the CXOs for the CXOs. Now to our host, Kanika Goswami.
Hello and welcome to our podcast On Stage with Enterprise Thought Leaders. Today we have with us Duncan Ash. He's Global Industries Vice President at Confluent. Welcome to our podcast, Duncan. It's great to have you on the show with us.
Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure. So at Confluent, Duncan has been working for over 25 years at the intersection of technology and business, and he has specialist skills in banking, capital markets, risk, and fraud prevention. Which is, fraud prevention is a particularly sensitive area of enterprise at this point. So I'm sure we're going to have some interesting points to discuss there. So a little bit about the company. Data in motion is becoming a foundational part of modern companies. Confluent is creating the foundational platform for data in motion. With Confluent, organizations can harness the full power of continuously flowing data to innovate and win in the modern digital world. So Confluent's cloud-native platform is designed to unleash real-time data, and it acts as a central nervous system in companies, letting them connect all their applications around real-time streams and react and respond intelligently to everything that happens in their business. Duncan, would you like to add something to this that we may have missed out about the company or about yourself that you think our audiences will find relevant?
No, I think that's all good at this point.
All right. So then we jump straight to the questions we planned out for you. As an experienced data professional, what specific data security measures do you think companies need to have and have to take at each of the data states?
Sure. Well, I guess I'm going to turn that question slightly on its head. Rather than talking about states specifically, I would talk about just data strategy in general and security strategy. So in order to achieve a high level of security, everything starts with a strategy, like all good things. You have to have a plan to start with. And I think firms are getting much better at this now, but it's a relatively new thing. I think a few years ago, if you asked companies to show you their data strategy, not everybody had a good answer. That's improving a lot, but in order to comply with all the various regulations that people are subjected to now, that data strategy is having to evolve to take into account the legal and the regulatory obligations, as well as just the practicalities of how you manage data. So starting off by just understanding how you manage your data classification. What is the type of data that you're dealing with? Is it something that doesn't matter very much, like, I don't know, data on the use of the lighting or the water within a building? Or is it something that's pretty important, like transactions? Or is it something incredibly important, like personally identifiable information? Or is it healthcare data? Depending on the type of information you've got, you need to have a specific plan on how you're going to manage it, how you're going to process it, where you're going to store it, how you deal with those access controls for who's allowed to see it, when they're allowed to see it, what context they're allowed to see it in, where you store it, and so on. And you look at all of the different things that you have to comply with in the healthcare industry or in banking, or under the new European regulations around DORA, this thing called the Digital Operational Resilience Act. It's very specific about how you deal with data, and then the framework around the GDPR, how you deal with all of those different types of data. It's getting harder and harder. And countries, I know there've been some countries, and people always use Switzerland as an example of, you need to be very careful with data about Switzerland, and you need to store the data within that country and make sure it doesn't leave, and all of those kinds of things. Well, I think everybody's getting to that point now. I think within a couple of years, every country we deal with will have the same kind of controls around data as Switzerland does, i.e. very robust controls. And so we got to kind of raise our game, and by having a really robust data strategy, we're at the basis of being able to put really good controls in place to make that data secure. So I guess I'm not focusing so much on the physical security of how you manage things like encryption and identity management, but just how you manage the data itself, and how long you got to keep it for, where you're going to keep it, and even deleting it. We can talk about that later, but people always talk about capturing and storing data, but people don't spend enough time on thinking about actually deleting data that they don't need anymore. So that was a long answer to your first question, but I think there's a lot for firms to do.
No, that was not a long answer at all. In fact, you could have gone on for a few more minutes. It would have been absolutely fine. But we'll move on to the next question. So there are many challenges to securing the flow of data, but which would you rate as a topmost or the best one that a company, should resolve before they handle sensitive data for business purposes? Are there any particular market trends that customers are repeatedly raising with you concerning this particular challenge of data security?
Yeah, there are a lot of things actually. I mean, something we get a lot from our customers is the requirements to build data products, and firms have been talking for a while about how they take data from a specific department and turn it into a product, and how they use that product to either distribute that data to external organizations or even to other departments within the same company. And because of the siloed nature of some of the firms we work with, you almost have to treat your next department, your adjacent departments within your own company, with the same kind of sensitivity as you would an external vendor. And so you have to put really good controls in place on that data. So, for example, if you were dealing with a static data set, you would be defining where it came from, who was allowed to see it, under what circumstances they're allowed to see it, how long you need to keep it for, where you have to store it, and very kind of specific information about that data. And then actually just to define what that data is and how people might want to use it so that you make the data really usable. But with Confluent, we're dealing with data in motion. So the notion of streaming data from one place to another, but also not just moving data from A to B, but actually working on that data whilst it's in motion. So the whole concept of stream processing. So how do we move from building a data product for static data to building a data product for a streaming data system? So effectively a streaming data product. So we have to be a little bit more thoughtful in how we manage that and make sure we are very much in control of that information and we know who's going to get it, what they're going to do with it, and making sure we don't inadvertently give somebody more data than they're actually allowed to see or to process. And so it's, again, it's all about planning and control. Actually setting up these data systems from a technical perspective is quite well understood, quite well documented. But the thoughtfulness goes into the planning stage. And I guess my advice on that one would be to make sure you work with the teams that are advising you on your legal and regulatory obligations. So get the lawyers involved, get them involved early. Be nice to your lawyers because they can really help you to define those processes and make sure that you're doing the right thing. It's where the data part of the organisation needs to work with other groups and do so really effectively in order to deliver something for the entire organisation, so that it can be really useful. Because you want to share that data, you don't want to just keep it to yourself. You want to make sure that people in other departments and even other companies can benefit from the information you're producing. But you just need to do it in a really grown-up way and make sure that you look after the information that you've got for as long as you need to.
And this is particularly true for the financial banking, insurance kind of, companies in that industry sector.
Yeah.
So my next question was going to be that there are some industries that require more stringent or more wide-reaching cybersecurity measures, and I'm guessing financial sector comes at the top there. There are some specialized regulations for data sharing in the sector as well. I'm sure you are the expert there. You can. So how do those industries differ from others when it comes to meeting this challenge of sharing or oversharing or trying not to overshare data, as you just said? What are some of the measures that you would recommend to organizations in that sector?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, I agree with you that financial services is one of the industries where protecting data is incredibly important. However, I think there was a point in time where people thought it was only financial companies and maybe healthcare companies that needed to look after people's data. But as time's gone on, I can't really think of any industries where it's not important now. So, you think about the industries adjacent to healthcare, so bioscience or pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, they've all got to look after data really well. Retailers, energy companies, utilities, e-commerce companies, telcos, they've all got to do the same thing because they're all dealing with, in a lot of cases, with personal data. A lot of time with financial data, credit cards, transactions, payments is built into just about everything now. So I think it's something that used to be the pain associated with working in financial services, but now it's actually now it's pretty widespread. So that's everywhere, and I think that all companies need to take a look at how they manage, particularly personally identifiable information, and then things like transactional data. That's where they need to start. They need to make sure that data strategy is in place. They they almost certainly need to make sure that they have a robust cybersecurity infrastructure and process, which I think the majority of big firms do now. But running a cybersecurity organisation is expensive, so it's harder for small firms simply because of the investment in technology and people that you need to make. So having really good cyber controls, having a security operations centre, making sure that you have good fraud prevention controls in place, making sure that fraud and cyber are joined up, and that IT is joined up with all of those things, and that legal and compliance are also joined up with all of those departments. So it's just as much about process as it is about software. Love to talk to you about threat detection and cybersecurity processes, but that's just the beginning of it. So yes, obviously we need to make sure that we protect all the endpoint devices and all the browsers and all the laptops and all the phones and all the IoT devices. We've got to do that, and then we've got to work out how to manage and protect all of the different software applications that people are using, whether they're internally deployed or whether they're in the cloud. But then we need to get that process in place as well. So there's a lot of things to do. And it's a subject of many webinars on all of the different parts of that process. But not for the faint-hearted.
Certainly. And as you were saying, every industry, yes, of course, faces the same challenges. And I'm also assuming that some amount of impact has been made by GDPR and CCPA once they've come into force. So people are more conscious about data and how it's being used and how it's being stored and how it's even being collated, right?
Yeah.
But, there is a question I had. It just came to mind. I would like to hear your opinion on it. Is how far do you think technology tools are going to be able to help secure data? So, I mean, there is a question we had that threat acts are becoming increasingly sophisticated. Do you see how modern technology can make cyberspace secure to a better extent, or any space for that matter? Anywhere where you have customer data or even company data residing. What kind of technology tools do you think can help to any extent?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the industry is in a transition, and obviously there's a lot of talk about AI in the media at the moment, and AI certainly has its place. So whether that's basic analytics or machine learning or more advanced AI, there's definitely a place for the automation of things like threat detection and looking for some of the more common threats within cybersecurity, and that applies to fraud detection as well. I'd also say that there's kind of a transformation in the way that people are dealing with the information at the moment, because in the past people were building tools around sort of first or second generation SIEM tools. So by SIEM I mean cybersecurity software, so things like Splunk and ArcSight and all the other tools out in the market. Those tools are obviously very, very well established and do a good job at what they do. But as time has gone on, and because of the proliferation of the number of cloud applications and of the number of devices and people and IoT systems in the market, the data volumes have increased dramatically. And so those traditional systems are under pressure from volume. And the more data you put in any system, the longer a search takes to run on it. So if your cyber defense is based on searches, so things like correlation searches for certain types of threat detection, that's great. But the more data you put in, the longer those searches take. So there are circumstances and systems I've seen out there where people have been waiting hours to get the results from threat detection systems. And if you have to wait 3 or 4 hours during a cyber attack, that's an incredibly long time. And so people need to move to a more real-time approach. And at Confluent, that's the sort of thing we've been doing. So we've been taking our platform and helping people to deal with things like threat detection in the stream. So take the most important threats that you have to deal with and build the detections for them as stream processing applications. Now, those may be rules-based, they may be statistical, they may be based on machine learning models, or they may be fully blown AI. We can kind of cope with any of the different variants. But for your most important things, you need to do the analysis in the stream. You can't put it in a data silo. You can't rely on old-fashioned index-based systems to do your threat detection because it takes too long. So figure out what's most important to you and move it kind of left in your architecture diagram towards the source and do your threat detections in the stream. So I think that's where the industry can make massive leaps and bounds. AI will be a part of that, as will getting hold of really good quality data and making sure that that data is fresh and accurate so that you can act upon it immediately and do your threat detection in real time.
Right. So does a cyber fusion center play a role in this?
Yes, absolutely. So the rise of the fusion center is something that's been happening over the last few years. It first came to light with a major incident that happened with a bank where some money was lost. A large amount of money was lost in a relatively short period of time, and the consultancy brought in to help them figure it out said, well, the only way you're going to be able to deal with this problem is if you bring your cyber teams and your fraud teams together, because historically they'd been in silos. The fraud team had been there for decades, and the cyber team was a relatively new organization. And the problem was that the cyber team and the fraud team didn't even work in the same buildings. They didn't really know each other, didn't share systems or data or processes. And so they were working independently on a problem that was really very much one and the same problem. And there are types of attacks, and obviously we could run through all the common cyber and fraud attacks. We'd be here for hours. But if you take something commonplace like a phishing attempt, that has the characteristics of a cyber attack. It also has the characteristics of a fraud. So you need data that's pertinent to both of those systems, and you need people who understand what an attack looks like so that they can fight it together. So you need information from your security operations center, the sort of things that security analysts normally deal with, particularly things like logs from the website, logs from the authentication system, logs from stores, syslog, network logs, all those kinds of things. But you also need the more traditional joined up static data sources that the fraud teams have, things like transaction records, so things from the general ledger about the actual transactions that are taking place. And by bringing fraud and security together, giving them access to both of those data sources and the ability to mine them and analyze them and act upon them, gives you a much stronger position when you're fighting not just existing types of threat, but new threats and threats you've never seen before. So that's that's obviously the enemy of the cyber teams, because it's very easy. Well, it's not very easy, but it's possible to model for a threat that you see every day, because then you can build techniques for defending against it. But the problem is the criminals know that, and so they come up with new ones all the time. So just when you think you've got everything sorted, they come up with a new threat, and you need new types of data to be able to deal with it. So it's really critical to have fresh and up-to-date data, but also to be able to break down those internal silos within your organization so that you can actually have all the information to hand, so that as you see a new threat, you're able to build a new defense for it and deal with it very quickly. But again, we're back to the same problem of where your data is and how it's classified and who can access it. So I know that there are a lot of things, for example, in a GDPR where you can actually make exceptions if you're using your data for cybercrime fighting or fraud prevention. Then you can have access to slightly more information. But of course, they have to treat that data with a lot of care and respect. So can't do anything with it, but you are allowed to to have that information and to join it together and to use it for your analysis when you need to.
Right. So, with so much of information at hand, so many regulations, so many compliances in place, and so many technology tools also assisting the UK industry, and I'm just talking about UK here. I mean, I'm sure it is applicable for the entire world wherever there is any kind of industry. The
Yeah.
UK industry is facing rising cyber threats. What impact do you see on digital initiatives due to this risk in UK enterprises? Do you see any impact on their digital transformation? Because, the fear factor of cyber threats looming up, the more digitization happens. Is it happening there? And despite that, is digitization on? Is the transformation happening?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a dramatic rise in digital transformation initiatives. I don't think that's in any way stopping. I think it certainly impacts the cost of digital transformation because people have to put cybersecurity controls, they have to build a security operations center, and they have to deal with fraud threats and put those protective measures in place. But it's not slowing them down. It's probably just making those projects a little bit bigger and increasing the scope. But if they use the right kind of technologies, the sort of streaming technologies that we're talking about, you can use that data more than once. You can use it for many, many different things. You can use it effectively. So if you've got information about your customers, you've got information about your products, what people are doing, you can use that information to fight crime, but you can also use that information to serve your customers better. So don't just see it as an overhead, but see it as an opportunity to do a better job of your digital transformation and to do what your customers want in the first place, which is to give them a really good experience, an experience that's free from financial crime attempts, that's free from security violations. But one way you show them the right information at the right time. There's nothing worse than spending 20 minutes in a website trying to find a piece of information that you're looking for. You want to be able to get hold of that information straight away. And if that information is personalized and delivered to you in the right format at the right time, then you'll have a better customer experience. And the digital transformation programs will pay off for those companies that invest in them, because their customers will remain loyal and they're more likely to spend money with those companies and have a better time doing so. So it's I wouldn't look at it as too much of an overhead. I would just look at it as an opportunity.
Right. And with that, we come to the end. Thank you so much for your time, Duncan.
Well, no, thanks very much. Nice to speak to you today.
It was a pleasure. Interesting insights, and I'm sure people who are our audiences would have enjoyed the conversation we had today. Thank you so much, Duncan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Please do follow us on social media for regular updates and new content.